59 of the CRICKETher Weekly. Happy Easter, if you're celebrating. Are we celebrating, Sid?
Yeah.
Will you be eating lots of chocolate later in celebration?
And hot cross buns. And I'm technically not supposed to eat hot cross buns.
That was for Friday, Sid.
Yeah,
Friday is for hot cross buns.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, we hope that you, our listeners and viewers, are having a great time wherever you are in the world, and whether you're celebrating Easter or not. We've got several things to talk about this week, so let's crack on. First of all, you thought that WPL was over, but, well, I mean, it is over. That sounded like I was about to introduce a whole raft of new fixtures. It is over for this year. However, the people who are organising it in India are obviously still already thinking about next year's competition, aren't they, Sid? What are the details that have emerged this week?
Yeah, well, the talk this week has been about introducing home and away fixtures next year. So obviously this year it was, all played in one place.
Mm-hmm.
That was very convenient for everybody. It meant the players didn't have to fly around. They could base all the players in one hotel. So that, if you were a player, you were in one place for the whole time. And it meant that they could easily do this thing that they did where they had the appointment of view, where I had the fixture, the same time every day, fixture every single day. And it was a great success, right? So the temptation from the BCCI's perspective is obviously going to be to do the same thing again. But what's really interesting is that, you now have, the team owners are now, a part of this partnership with the BCCI, and the team owners long term need to think about how they're going to make money. Why do they need to think about that? Well, everybody wants to make money, but the key thing about WPL is, at the moment, the TV money is being ploughed back into the teams. So the money that the TV companies are paid is being given back to the teams, and the teams can use that to pay their salaries. But longer term, the BCCI have said, look guys, that TV money, that's actually our money. We're planning to keep the TV money, and you need to pay the salaries out of your team's pocket, by itself. You need to sell enough tickets, get enough sponsorship, do whatever you need to do to find that salary money, because we're keeping the TV money after the first few years, and you need to stand on your own 2 feet. So what that means from the owner's perspective is that they need these home and away fixtures. Every owner needs a number of fixtures played in their own city, so they can start to fill a stadium with fans, start to sell replica shirts on a much wider basis, start to tell locally based industrial sponsors, look, you can sponsor the team in our area, and we'll be playing 4 games in our area, or we'll be playing our home games there.
And it's like local exposure then for the sponsors, isn't it? Which is really important.
Yeah, so all of these things, push the owners towards wanting to push for this proper home and away thing. And the 100 has been able to do it in this country, a proper home and away thing, because at the end of the day, England is actually a pretty small place. But the bigger countries, it's more of a challenge. So Australia in the WBBL, I don't think they've ever done this. I certainly can't recall a season where they had a full raft of home and away fixtures. In every season, as far as I remember, someone might come up and say, oh, actually, in WBBL 2 they did, so apologies if that's the case. But mostly, you've had like a few instances at least where, teams have done things like a team like Brisbane has flown to Perth and they've played both the home and away fixture at Perth on consecutive days. So not every team has played all of their home games at home, and there's been these festival weekends they've done in recent WBBLs where they've played sort of 6 games over the space of 3 days, and every team has been in Sydney for, 4 days to do that. Now, the WPL's challenge is that, they need, the owners are putting pressure on the BCCI to have this full home and away thing for the reasons we talked about. And that makes the tournament much more logistically complicated. It means that you've got to fly players back and forth around India. You can't even really do the thing where you go, well, we'll play 4 games in this city, and then we'll move to this city and play the 4 home games there, and then we'll move to that, because that just that doesn't work from a scheduling perspective. That's going to give you big gaps between the games. So it's going to mean a lot more flying around for the players, and it's going to have to mean they build a lot more rest days into it, and that in turn is going to mean that the WPL is going to last longer. So I would be amazed if they really are going to do full home and away. I'll be amazed if they can squeeze it into 6 weeks. I think you're probably talking about, I think you're probably it took the best part of a month to do it, even though all of the fixtures were played in one
So
city.
are they actually saying they're definitely going to do full home and away?
That's that. The pressure is from well, I think what we're seeing here is the reason that people are talking about it is because the owners are making this public because they are trying to put pressure on the BCCI to do it. Because the BCCI, as we said, the BCCI's temptation will be to just repeat the same thing.
Okay.
That's not what the owners need.
So I think at the moment the WPL has a 2-month window scheduled for it in the ICC's Future Tours programme for women, which goes for the next 2.5 years or something. So the 100 and the WBBL and the WPL have all got their own windows within that. None of the other franchise competitions do at the moment. So they have got that space to expand a little bit within the current constraints of the Future Tours programme. But I think if you're looking beyond about 8 weeks, then you're going to struggle.
Yeah, no, I don't think at this stage we're looking beyond that 8 weeks. While there's still only 5 teams. If they're going to move it up to 8 or 10 teams,
that's when you
and
start
and that's exactly what happens with the men's IPL. That's why the men's IPL is 3 months now.
But I think they have actually said it's going to stay at 5 teams for the next couple of years.
Yeah, they have done that. Yeah. So what you're looking at is a 6-week tournament that's going to be much more tiring for the players. There's going to be a lot of plane trips, a lot of hotel moves. You're going to be 2 nights in this city, fly overnight, 2 nights in this city, fly again. It's going to be a much tougher deal for the players. Now they're being very nicely remunerated for this.
They're not going to turn their money. They're not going to turn their noses up at that money, are they? For however many flights you have to get on for it.
No, but they're going to earn their money much more next year, and it's going to be more of a challenge going forwards. And especially, that's what I really wanted to highlight here is that when we're talking about moving to more teams and things, it's going to mean inevitably a much longer window, which is going to be more challenging to the overall structure of the game.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's going to put pressure on the ICC for when they are agreeing their next Future Tours programme to agree to a longer window for it. And then also, as we've kind of previously discussed, it may be if you're getting players who are going off and having to spend several months playing in this, they're less likely to play in other franchise competitions.
Yeah, no. If you've been the best part of 2 months in India, then you're probably going, well, maybe I'm not going to do the WBBL, for example.
Yeah, but definitely, and we've talked about there being pressures on the WBBL to maybe contract and be a bit shorter and have a few less flights, because if you're playing in WBBL, you're doing just as much travelling as you're talking about in India, but you're doing it over a longer period of time and for less money. And the elephant in the room in all this is the 100. We're very biased because we get to watch all the matches in the 100. It's very convenient for us. But of those big 3 franchise competitions, it's the least well paid. Possibly given the pay increases that Cricket Australia announced in WBBL last week, possibly by far the least well paid.
Yeah, and it's probably the lowest status of the 3. The WBBL has status from the fact that it's the oldest one that's been truly significant. The WPL that has achieved its own status in the space of just a year. Just one thing. I mean, 4 months ago, we didn't know what the WPL was. So yeah, it's a challenge for everybody. But it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, and it'll be interesting to see how the home and away thing plays out, because there's no guarantee, of course, that the BCCI will agree to what the owners want. And ultimately, that makes life harder for the owners, and then we're back into potential territory where the owners are going to struggle to actually pay those bills and to pay the salaries. Unless the BCCI continue to do what they're doing right now, which is basically go, look, we'll give you the TV money and you can pay your salaries that way.
One would hope that this would lead to pressure on the ECB to raise the salaries in the Women's 100.
Well, interestingly, Raf.
Yes, that's one of our other topics for this week, isn't it, Sid? So the ECB head honcho, Richard Gold.
Give him his full title.
Richard Gold has given an interview this week, and it's obviously been a kind of one of those all-in interviews with lots of journalists. So the first thing to say is actually I'm a bit cross that we didn't receive an invite to this. It's frustrating because when you look at what was obviously discussed in that media opportunity with him, because you read the pieces that come out of that based on the quotes that he gave, they're all focused very much on men's cricket. And this is one of the issues with merged governance, isn't it? Because when somebody like that, who's at the head of the organisation, speaks publicly about their vision and their values and
they
their
do
mission.
a rare interview, because they don't do these interviews very often.
Exactly, and then they end up speaking for 95% of the time about men's cricket, and it's very frustrating. And I think one of the last times that this happened was with the previous head honcho, Tom Harrison, thank you. Actually did one of these, and it was in the middle of COVID. It was September 2020, and it was over Zoom, of course, because everything was over Zoom. And we were actually there making sure, we were in the Zoom room making sure that he spoke about women's cricket, and he actually gave a few quotes about women's cricket. But if we hadn't been there, then who knows? And it's very frustrating then to feel like...
we know exactly what would have happened if we hadn't been there.
Well, it's very frustrating to feel like we've therefore missed out on the opportunity to ask him, what is your vision for women's cricket? And actually, some of the big news that's come out of that media opportunity in relation to pay is that apparently the England men, who, according to CRICKETher, the current worth of the England men's central contracts is between £200,000 and £800,000. So that is a hell of a lot more than any of the England women are getting paid. The England men are getting pay rises apparently because of this threat from franchise cricket. There's been very little talk about what that means for the England women. I think he did say one thing that suggests that he wants the match fees for the England women to increase, and kind of there's a sort of tacit recognition that there's a bit of pressure from franchise cricket in the women's game as well. But he doesn't really seem to have talked about that very much, and it would have been so positive to be able to be in there, to be in that chat and be like, okay, so can you talk about this? And actually, how much are the England women currently paid? Because nobody seems to know, because the ECB won't release the figures, and they say, oh, it's because we don't like to talk about how much people are getting paid. Well, we've literally got an article on CRICKETher that's telling us.
Every time Ben Stokes gets paid another $100,000 a year, everyone's quite happy to slip out exactly how much he's being paid.
Yeah.
So
it's an unlevel playing field in that regard, and it's made me a bit cross, because really, do the England men really need to be paid more than that?
Well, I mean, they're allowing the England men to shake them down over things like this Major League Cricket, which some of the men want to go and play instead of playing in the 100 because it'll pay them a lot more money in the short term. And, good luck to them on that basis. They need to look after themselves, and they're doing that. But it does feel like every time the men want a bit more, the ECB are able to find a bit more money down the back of the sofa.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas when anything happens with women's cricket, it's much more of a struggle. And there have been increases in women's cricket. To be fair, we've got more domestic contracts than ever before this year. But those domestic contracts, for example, remain very low value, and several of the players, particularly the ones that are on the shorter term contracts that are effectively only going to be employed for a few months, are going to end up being paid across the length of the year well less than this legendary PCA minimum wage of whatever it is, 28,000.
Yeah, it's frustrating because if I'd been in this media opportunity, sorry to keep banging on about it, but it's just because it is one of those rare times when you think they needed to have somebody in the room asking questions who cared about women's cricket. And if I'd been in the room, then I would have been able to say, okay, so you're giving the England men a pay rise. Are you saying that the England women aren't getting a pay rise? And if you are saying that, then how exactly are you justifying that? Because I want to hear you justify it. And those are the questions that don't get asked still so often, and it's really frustrating to then read these pieces that are written after the fact and not be able to have that opportunity to ask the difficult question. Anyway, I think it also to some extent does link back to something that we talked about last week about the different cultures in relation to pay in England and Australia. In Australia, there's been this whole big negotiation between the Players Association and Cricket Australia, and they've now come out and it's very much about spreading the increase in revenue, but much
as
more
widely as possible. Across
giving pay rises to the women, the domestic women in that specific instance. And in England, we're still in a situation where it's okay to announce the England men having these pay rises, and nobody will pop up and say, hello, women's cricket exists, by the way. It's just such a different culture somehow, and that really needs to change. And that's my thought. I won't bang on about this for too much longer.
Okay.
We did have some other kind of interesting, exciting news, positive news, that seems to have slightly leaked out in relation to domestic women's cricket in England, Sid. Now, this is something you actually called for. So basically, what has happened is that the Blaze, which are the they were Loughborough Lightning, weren't they? And then they've
formerly known as Loughborough
They've
Lightning.
moved to Trent Bridge. So then now the team known as the Blaze, based at Trent Bridge in Nottinghamshire, that have said basically some of our players are playing in a fixture, and it's a two-day red ball fixture being played at Kibworth Cricket Club in the Midlands next week. Actually, on Tuesday and Wednesday, 11th and 12th of April. We knew nothing about this. Nobody seemed to know anything about this. And Blaze basically said, oh yeah, our players are playing in this particular fixture. Now, what's interesting about it, Sid, is that it's north v south, and that's, as I say, it's something you've called for previously, isn't it?
Yeah, the issue is with any kind of red ball cricket is that you need the players to be available to play it, obviously. Yeah. But we have now got enough professionals that we can play a north v south game. Obviously, playing the individual regions against each other, it means you'd have to play multi-day cricket. You'd almost certainly have to encroach upon the working week. Yeah. And we've still got plenty of players that have our students, full-time students, or that have other jobs. So you can't just plonk games randomly, on a Wednesday and Thursday. We've got enough pros now that you can do that with the professionals. So that means that if you pare down the teams and combine the teams into north v south. I know that people from the Midlands don't necessarily massively appreciate being referred to as northerners.
It's actually being played in the Midlands. That's what's quite funny about it. Anyway.
But it makes sense to do it like that, I think. And yeah, it's an opportunity for some red ball cricket, and it's the first it's the first red ball cricket that's been played for several years, because of course the county championship was certainly within the last it changed about 2013. It changed
something
from
like that.
Being because that was originally, although a one-day competition, it was played in whites with a red ball. So it's the first red ball cricket, and it's the first multi-day cricket that's been played for a long time, isn't it, Raf? When was the last time that there was any multi-day cricket in the domestic women's calendar?
You're talking decades and decades ago. I don't know exactly when, off the top of my head, but a very, very long time ago. Yeah.
So so it's an exciting opportunity. It's something that Australia haven't yet got into.
Well,
so
exactly. That's partly why I'm kind of excited about it, because I think, and you would hope that the ECB can see this strategically, is if you compare the positions of where we are with where Australia are, if we can really get on this, get some regular domestic red ball cricket scheduled in our calendar, then that puts us a step ahead of Australia on at least one count.
Yeah.
The Australian players have been calling for red ball domestic cricket for years, and Cricket Australia have kind of continually sort of shut that down a little bit. But now, we are seeing the revival of women's test cricket very much, with not just it being the women's Ashes, but there are also being other countries now who want to play women's test cricket. So if England can get ahead of the game in that respect, I think that could be really exciting.
Yeah, and as long as we take this seriously, and I'm hoping, for example, that it's going to be a proper, kind of first-class type game. I'm not sure how many innings it's going to be. We haven't been given any details about that.
We haven't.
But I'm hoping that it'll be a proper game.
Yeah.
And what I mean by a proper game is that often in kind of these training games, you get people going, oh, well, you can bat again because you got out for only 3, so we'll let you bat again at number 11 in place of the bowler. And I call these jumpers for goalposts games because they're not really doing there needs to be actual pressure on people.
Yes.
You need to, if you're out, you need to be out.
Yeah.
It needs to be maybe 11 players. I could cope with 12 players if they go, okay, well, we're going to have effectively like what they call in baseball a designated hitter. We'll have a bowler that doesn't have to bat and a batter that doesn't have to bowl or doesn't have to field.
Just to give more people
that experience. Yeah. But it's important that you give people that experience, because one of the problems with the test situation at the moment is we've got people like Izzy Wong last year and Lauren Bell. That was the first class game they'd ever played. Was in an Ashes test. Sorry, not an Ashes test. There was in a test against South Africa. Get that thing of where a test is automatically an Ashes test.
Not anymore.
It's not anymore. No.
News.
So the first ever first class game they played was a test match.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be the case. Whereas hopefully going forward we'll be able to provide these experiences. And if we can have this kind of game, this North v South, maybe 3 times a year. And maybe it could be 3 days, guys. And as long as it's a proper game where there's genuine jeopardy if you get out, we'll give some more red ball captaincy experience. You know, you could, Grace Scrivens could actually captain one of these sides, and actually, the first time she captains in a test match, and a first class match won't be in a test match.
Yeah.
And I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and we're really supportive of it. The one disappointment is that they've kept it so quiet, haven't they?
Exactly, and it just feels like it's being done a little bit secretively, and I don't really understand why. I guess that maybe the facilities at this club where they're holding it aren't great, so they don't necessarily want to encourage spectators, but realistically, even if they had advertised it, they're not going to get loads of spectators coming along midweek to a random 2-day.
They've got a reasonable clubhouse there, but it would just be, if 1,000 people turned up, they'd be in trouble.
No, but that wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And the thing is, all they'd have to do is just say, look, this is happening, the facilities aren't going to be great, there won't be any toilets, you have to sort yourself out for food and everything like that, but why not come along? Or actually shout about it, but say, sorry, this is a closed game, because that does happen with warm-up games at Loughborough, when we're told explicitly, I'm sorry, nobody can actually come along and watch this. But, shout about it, say this is a really great thing, this is really positive, because we've been calling for this. You specifically called for this in 2020. You wrote a piece saying, why are you not doing this? Or was it 2021? Anyways, years ago. And now they are doing it, and they have kept it quiet. And I just kind of wonder, is it the ECB who's organised this, or is it the regions? Where's this impetus coming from? Because nobody has said anything publicly other than Blaze sort of accidentally letting the cat out of the bag, and you wonder whether somebody's rung them up and gone, you shouldn't really have done that, guys. Because we didn't want anyone to know about this, but it could be that it's not coming from the ECB, that it's actually the regions who are going, oh, well, we've got some autonomy, let's organise this amongst ourselves, and let's show that our players have got some red ball experience under their belt, and hey, what's the first international match that's happening this year? Oh, it's the Ashes Test match. Well, our players have played red ball cricket more recently than any of the England players.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that we don't know, that we're just sitting here speculating, is again indicative of that situation. That it's like, well, you haven't told anybody anything about it. So anyway, it's still a positive thing. We'll be looking out for some scorecards.
Well, we
if
hope
it's live
that we'll get some.
Well, that will be even better.
That will make our Tuesday and Wednesday work days very unproductive indeed, Sid. Happy days. Anyway, please live stream it if anyone from the regions happens to be watching this. That would be great. Thanks very much. And please organise some more, because we want to see more red ball domestic cricket. And this shows that you can organise it. So there you go. Right, that's all for now. Happy Easter again, and thank you for tuning in. Bye.
Bye.